Hi, Stories Channel here.
And today we'll take a look at the 2013 American slasher movie, called Hatchet 3. The movie begins from the Honey Island swamp where Marybeth manages to kill Victor Crowley with a shotgun and bashes his head into a pulpy mess. But just as she walks away, the monster wakes up again. In the meantime, Marybeth staggers through the forest and comes across the other people chopped into pieces. She grabs the leftover guns but all of them are empty. She then comes across a chainsaw and tries to start it, but Victor appears out of nowhere and lifts her up in the air. In her attempt to fight back, she thrusts her whole arm into his bludgeoned face that makes him fall down. Suddenly, the chainsaw starts up and slowly, the blades sink into his body and slashes the hole into two. Marybeth is splattered with Victor's blood as the chainsaw arises from his carcass. The following scenes show us Marybeth walking away with Victor's scalp until she arrives on the bank of the lake. The movie now spans to the police station where Officer Winslow is taking care of the drunkards, while the sheriff arrives and greets him. As he advances to sit in his office, a sudden scream is heard, stating, "She's got a gun." All the personnel dash towards the entrance where Marybeth stands holding the gun, and Victor's scalp. She utters, "I killed him," and with that, she's pinned to the ground. Sheriff starts inquiring about her in extreme anger and she states that they're all dead on the Honey Island swamp. Winslow immediately dispatches forces while Marybeth is taken to the cleaning area where she gets a shower. All the blood washes off her body as the female officers inform the sheriff that none of the blood is hers. Later, as Marybeth sits in her cell, Sheriff Fowler interrogates her and she states that there are 20 to 30 bodies in the swamp. Moreover, the fact that Victor Crowley murdered her family. Fowler gets irritated and lashes out on her for spitting some urban legend and doesn't believe her, but suddenly gets a dispatch from his associate Hamilton, that there are mutilated bodies at the swamp. The scene then shows us bashed heads, and skinned bodies upon which the policemen throw up. Hamilton asks for full recovery teams and Fowler answers with affirmation. As he's about to leave, a woman named Amanda stands in the hallway. Fowler gets agitated, but she insists that she wants to work on the case because it has hints of Victor Crowley and how her research will finally be complete. But Fowler doesn't listen to his ex-wife despite her pleas. As he dashes outside, Amanda grabs hold of Winslow and convinces him to let her meet the girl in custody. Back on the swamp, paramedics arrive and Hamilton informs them about the situation. The head of paramedics, Jim Buffy, takes a guy named Andrew with him, while leaving the rest for body bagging. As they're about to leave, their eyes catch the horrifying sight of a severed head being brought to the boat. Nevertheless, they continue. In the meantime, Amanda arrives at Marybeth's cell and introduces herself as a journalist. Amanda tries to inquire about her, but Marybeth pushes her away abusively. Despite her requests, Marybeth tells her to go to hell, which makes Amanda angry and she threatens Marybeth about how she'll spend the rest of her life in jail if they both don't help each other. With that being said, Marybeth reconsiders her options. On the other hand, it starts raining on the swamp and a massive body bag gets carried to the boat. Andrew hauls it up and places a gas belt sander on the side. As the other guy, Randy, inquires, Andrew describes him the condition which depicts Victor Crowley. Randy gets excited and they both drag the gigantic body inside and place it on the table. Back at the police station, Amanda scribbles the notes as Marybeth explains how she killed Victor Crowley once and for all. But Amanda states that a priestess told her that Victor's a repeater and he'll return every night and you cannot kill him because he's already dead. Marybeth insists, but Amanda also stays adamant that he's not dead. The scene now shifts to swamp where Hamilton informs the massacre situation to Randy, and as he couldn't bear the smell of dead bodies, he leaves. Inside the boat, Randy prepares for the autopsy when suddenly the body bag starts to rise. Within less than a minute, Randy gets electrocuted by the monstrous man, and he bashes the boy's head into a pulp. Outside, Hamilton notices the splattered blood on the window and pulls his gun. With a bang, Victor appears on the boat and dashes towards Hamilton. Victor gets fired upon but revives again. Hamilton falls on the ground and crawls backwards in utter horror. Meanwhile, his screams and frightened voice rings through the microphone and everyone hears it, including Winslow, Amanda and Marybeth at the station. Amanda hears the screams of terror and states that Marybeth must give Victor what he wants, which is his father. Furthermore, she explains that only Marybeth can end it, as she is the only living relative of Samson Dunstan, the man who caused all of it. With that, she urges Winslow to let her go free as everyone else is out there dying. Winslow gets worried as his microphone screeches with dying noises of his fellows. Meanwhile, Sheriff arrives at the swamp and starts to direct the officers, but just then, SWAT also arrives and the leader named Hawes takes over. On the other hand, an officer brings out an RPG while a girl from SWAT introduces herself as Michaela. The guy named Schneiderman tries to tell her about Victor Crowley as she was new here, but they get ushered ahead. In the meantime, Winslow drives the ladies while blabbering about how wrong he's doing. Ignoring his complaints, Amanda urges them to go to Ozona right away, to get to Thomas Crowley, Victor's father. On the other hand, night falls in the swamp as the forces move through the woods led by Haas. The group starts the small talk, but that doesn't last long as they arrive at a gory mess of human flesh and internals scattered all around the place. Schneiderman gets hysterical immediately, but the officers order him to stay put. Back at Winslow's car, he complains again that he's not going, but Amanda insists that they have to go to Abbott McCullen, who's a nephew of Thomas Crowley, and he has the ashes. Marybeth has to be the one to return them to Victor as he's looking for them ever since. That's the only way to end all of it. Meanwhile, the graveness escalates at the swamp as Schneiderman locates a pair of balls hanging from the tree and freaks out. Just then, Andrew jumps in front of them and briefs them about the brutality that's going on. The need to call in the National Guard becomes necessary, but Haas cancels the request and urges to move forward and be strong. Nobody believes Andrew's story about Victor, but Schneiderman starts to run away. Haas runs after him and pins him to the tree, stating that he's not allowed to flee the murder scene. Just then, Andrew points at a spot where everyone suddenly senses movement and screeching noises. The bushes start to move and all the personnel get ready with their guns. Andrew hides behind Michaela, and as another screech erupts from the bushes, all the officers start shooting. The bullets rain down on the area, and as their magazines are emptied, Haas urges his associates to move forward in order to take a look. No one complies, so Haas proceeds himself, and utter calmness appears on his face as he finds a rodent in the bushes. He lifts up the carcass and shows it to everybody, which spreads a moment of relaxation among them. Unfortunately, it doesn't last long as they hear another strange noise and everyone gets alert. The forces move on until they come to an open space beside a wooden shed. As two police officers stand in front of the door, an iron spike emerges from the darkness and impales one of them. The other policewoman also gets dragged away with a rope. The men start firing and Fowler holds onto her leg, but their efforts go in vain as she gets pulled in anyway. Upon that bereaving incident, Haas orders to fire at once and all hell is broken loose. The soldiers and officers empty their magazines on the shed, but Victor still comes out alive and starts attacking the officers. He grabs hold of a paramedic member and rips his body into two. He then uses his axe to cut off the heads and chop off the legs of other officers as well. The firing starts again, but Victor stands as sturdy as a tank. Having run out of ammo, Haas charges towards Victor bare-handed, but the beast overcomes him and rips out his whole spine along with his skull, in one lethal tug. The monster growls in anguish and proceeds to attack another guy. In the meantime, Schneiderman comes forward and starts assembling the RPG. Sheriff Fowler stops him, but he doesn't listen, and as Victor takes the man to the shed, Schneiderman hoists up the RPG and launches the missile towards Victor. But the cunning freak dodges it and the paramedic becomes the victim instead. The shed blows up and Schneiderman cheers in victory, but just then, Victor emerges from the blistering cabin and impales a wooden log in Schneiderman's back. The poor guy drops while Michaela tries to save him. Victor charges forward, hits her and attacks Schneiderman. Fowler orders everyone to run back to the boat while Victor rages brutality on Schneiderman by ripping off his arms and then crushing his skull in the mud. The scene now shifts back to Ozona, where Winslow and Amanda meet Abbott and request him to take a look inside. As the racist guy takes them inside, Amanda manages to get hold of Thomas Crowley's urn and threatens her way out with a gun. The guy named Abbott scolds them, but Amanda and Winslow manage to escape the house by having the old man at gunpoint. Meanwhile, back at the swamp, the three of them run towards the boat and come across another paramedic guy who scampers away but falls prey to an alligator while Victor watches him being brutalized. In the interim, the sheriff group leads to the boat, but it turns out that Andrew doesn't have the keys to start the engine. As they formulate a plan to run away to another boat, Victor blocks their path. With no other choice left, they find the safe haven in the boat. But the torment doesn't stop there as the whole cabin starts shuddering violently. The three of them whimper in fright while Fowler manages to dispatch the National Guard and ask for military assistance. The operator confirms the request and the three of them then wait. Suddenly, the metal wall starts buckling and Andrew remarks that Victor might be using the gas belt sander left on the boat. Fright crawls up their spines as sparks fly due to the resistance and a hole is slashed in the metal sheet. In the meantime, Amanda and Winslow also reach the swamp area where they argue over the fact whether they should proceed or not. Winslow tries to contact Fowler, but it gets known that someone made a distress call to the National Guard and asked for assistance. That strengthens Amanda's belief that Victor is there at the swamp. Meanwhile, the situation at Honey Island escalates as Andrew tries to grab a hammer from the front of the hole, but Victor grabs him by the collar and tries to pull him out. Michaela comes to rescue and she repeatedly bashes Victor's hand with the hammer until Andrew is free. With that, all of them move to the corners to heave a sigh of temporary relief. On the other hand, Amanda and others walk upon the massacre and she gives the urn to Marybeth, stating that she has to be the one to hand it over to Victor. With that, she starts calling him out. Her voice echoes through the woods and Victor hears it along with others. Fowler recognizes her voice and proceeds to go look for her, but Victor attacks him and rips off his head to shreds and his dead body drops back in the cabin. Michaela and Andrew scoop away in horror as blood showers from Fowler's severed neck. After a while, Michaela gets the crazy idea to grab the gun placed in front of the hole. Andrew pleads with her to stop and not advance anymore, but she doesn't listen and eventually tastes the aftermath. Victor grabs her from the hole and she falls prey to his barbarity as well. In the meantime, Amanda calls out for Victor while Marybeth and Winslow feel the eeriness. Suddenly, Victor emerges from the shadows and Amanda starts stating that they have his daddy. She runs behind Marybeth and forces her to go forward and give him the ashes. Frightened to death, Marybeth slowly approaches Victor, apologizes to him in every way possible and places the urn in front of him. Meanwhile, Amanda orders Winslow to hold the fire until Victor grabs the urn. Marybeth places the jar and starts to edge away, while Victor takes one look at the urn in a sad way, but immediately gets agitated again and takes a step towards Marybeth. Just then, Winslow empties his magazine on the monster and Victor drops to the ground. Unfortunately, just as Winslow turns around, the Titan grabs him from behind and rips his chest apart. Amanda lunges forward and throws the urn towards Marybeth but becomes the victim to Victor's brutality as well. As Marybeth stares in horror, the beast tears Amanda's head off her body and throws it towards her. Marybeth gets knocked down and Victor picks her up. In a ravaging push, he impales her on a branch and picks up a machete to put an end to her life. But heroically, Marybeth breaks the urn on Victor's head and he gets covered in his father's ashes. As the monster staggers back, his face starts to melt gruesomely. As his slashed-up body decays rapidly, Marybeth manages to break the branch and she falls on the ground. She watches Victor being putrefied in a hideous manner and in an effort to finally finish him, she picks up a gun under the agonizing pain. The final moments of the film arrive where Marybeth ultimately manages to burst the decaying skeletal carcass of Victor Crowley, and then goes unconscious due to the pain. Just then, the military forces also arrive at the swamp and upon hearing the sounds of choppers, Andrew emerges from the boat and shouts for help. On the other hand, as the choppers lower down, Marybeth suddenly wakes with a jolt and the movie comes to an end. Thanks for watching, guys.